Hi, it's Roberta with Quilt Crafters Corner. Today's block is called Cactus Flower. This block comes from quilterscash.com and they're free for you to use. So let's talk about this block. First of all, there's some tricky parts to it, so I want to show you how to do that so that they turn out well for you. So let's take a look at today's block. Okay, as you can see, today's block has got half square triangles, and it's also got some parts here that are new. So let's look at how this block goes together. Now, we originally start with half square triangles there. So, and those are made with a 4x8 piece of fabric, and then another 4x8, right sides together. And what I do is I mark the center. Oh, excuse me, this is 5x10. This is not 4x8, this is 5x10. This is 5x10 rectangle. And what I do is I mark the center at the top and at the bottom, and then what I do is I run my diagonal from my center bottom out to my point, and I draw my line, and then I go from the center point out to the other one. Now this is going to give me my 4 half square triangles. So what I'll do is I'll take this to the machine and I'll start here at this corner, and I will sew a scant 1/4 inch off of the line that I drew, and I'll come down this way, and then I'll pivot and I'll go up this way, and then I'll pivot again and I'll come back down towards the middle, and then pivot back and then go back up the other way. And I really, it's much faster to do it this way. That way you're not lifting your material, you're really not moving it around much, and it just goes much quicker, and you get 4 half square triangles. So I will take this to the machine and I will sew that. Okay, so now I have sewn a scant 1/4 inch on each side of these lines, and now I will cut this apart. So first I'm going to cut it down the center, and I'm going to have 2 squares now. And now I'm going to cut on that diagonal line that I drew from point to point, and I'm going to have 2 half square triangles. And now I'm going to have 2 more. Okay, so I have 4 half square triangles now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open these up and take them to the iron, and I'm going to press to the dark fabric, to the darker side of the fabric. Okay, I'm going to take these over and I'm going to press these open. Okay, I've pressed these and they're nice and flat. Now what I want to do is I want to trim these up. Now, because this is 3 down and 3 across, I know that these are supposed to be 4.5 inches. She doesn't always say on the pattern what size to trim them up to, so I like to pay attention to what size I'm working with and trim from there. So I line my 45 diagonal up on the seam. I just right there on the seam, and then trim. And I like to trim these, that way I know my points are going to come out right. Because if you have that that seam right there on the diagonal, it just makes it much easier to trim up, and you get a nice, better, your block just goes together much nicer. Okay, so there are my 4 half square triangles. Okay, now the next part of the block is we need to make this part here. Now she has you cut an 8 1/4 square, a 6 1/2 inch square. Then you have a 4 1/2 inch square and a 2 1/2 inch square. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to cut this into quarters. You're going to cut this from point to point this way, and then from point to point this way. And when you do that, you are going to get 4 of these pieces. You're going to get one here, 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 and here. So since I have 2 left from this block, I'm going to use those. But that's how you would cut your 8 1/4 inch square. So I have these 2 already. Now, in order to make this part here, one needs to be 5 1/2 inches long, and the other one needs to, I cut it a little bit longer. It actually needs to be 11 7/8. So 11 7/8 it is. So there's my 11 7/8, and then this one is going to be 5 1/2. Okay, so this piece here, the 5 1/2, is going to go in between those 2 1/4 square triangles from the 8 1/4. So what I'll do is I'll lay this one this way and line it up, and then I'll take it to the machine and sew it. So there's my first piece. It's attached, and now I'm going to be attaching this one. Now you need to be very careful with these because this is a bias cut and this is a bias cut. And I did lightly starch these pieces before I cut them, just so that I had some stability in, because I knew I was going to be cutting, you know, half square triangles and 1/4 square triangles. So starch is your friend, especially on the bias. So now I'll take this to the machine and sew this. Okay, so there's my piece there. Now we just need to cut off these little tabs here. Now to finish this corner, you take a 2 1/2 inch square and you cut it on the diagonal. And like I said, I still have one left from the last one, so I will use that here. So this needs to be placed there, and as you can see, it's much, much bigger. So what I did is I laid this in half, and I just did a tiny little crease here. And I did the same thing with my 2 1/2 inch square. Just be very careful that you don't stretch it too much. And then what I did is I laid those just right inside of each other so that they match up. And now what I'll do is I'll sew this. Now as you can see, it's a little bigger than my corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the corner of my ruler, and I'm going to line this up very carefully with the edges so to make sure my edges all meet and work. And I'm just going to trim this extra off. So there's that, and there's that one. So now there's my corner of the block. So let's do this part of the block. Now this is the other half of my 6 1/2 inch square. Here's my 6 1/2 inch square, and this is just cut from on the diagonal from point to point, and you'll get 2 of them. You only need 1 for the block, so you'll have to make 2 blocks. Now this is the strip that goes here. So I will take this to the machine. Once again, line it up just so that it's even. and just make a little crease, a registration mark, whatever you want to call it. Just take your fingernail and make a little mark so that you can see where the center of that is. And then do the same with your half square triangle. And just very carefully you want to do this so that you don't stretch your fabric out. Like I said, starch is a really good thing here. So there's your 2 marks, and then so now those 2 will just lay inside of each other. And I know I'll have enough going out. Now, this is cut extra long because you can see that it's going to keep coming out this way. So you need this extra here because then once it's laid out, that's going to be coming down this way. So that's why these are longer than your half square triangle. So let's just lay that like that. Now I'll take this to the machine and sew a scant 1/4 inch. Okay, so here's your piece. I've sewn it, and what I've done is I've pressed to the darker fabric, and now I'm just going to need to square this up. So whatever you feel comfortable with. Sometimes I like using the longer ruler just so that I know I'm square at the top and I'm square down here at the bottom. And then you just need to trim those little pieces off. And then the same thing with this side here. Okay, so there is that part. Now, these 2 pieces just need to be put together. So once again, I take my thing and I make my little registration mark, and then the same thing here with this one. Make my mark. That way I know I've got these lined up correctly and they just kind of fit right there on top of each other. And so now I need to take these and sew them. Okay, so here is my block. Now, as you can see, I need to do a little bit of trimming here on this. I need to trim off these edges. These little points, dog ear type things. Now this should measure 8.5 inches. In order to fit with your 4.5 inch squares, we need this to be 8.5 inches. So check your measurements on that because otherwise it won't fit. So let's put the petals of the cactus flower together, and I will take these to the machine and I will sew them. Okay, so now these need to be, this one side needs to be put over. It doesn't matter if you do it this way or do this one. And then just take this to the machine and sew it. And make sure that you get right here, right above where these 2 seams cross, and then that way you won't lose your points. Okay, so now I have that attached. So what I'll do is I'll attach this to here and then attach this to that one. So there are your 2 blocks. The 2 blocks are finished. So that's your block. It's called Cactus Flower from Quilter's Cache. So please like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the notification bell and that will tell you when I have new videos up. And if you really want to join like-minded quilters, come join Quilter Swarm on the Facebook page. We'd love to have you. You can post pictures of what you're working on and you can see what we're working on. So have a great day and I'll see you again soon.